right off the bat. We wiggly. Why we so wiggly? I know all you're trying to do is get in the shot so that the camera focuses on you and not me. Why am I talking to my microphone? So yeah, this is what my voice sounds like right now. It's gonna be a lot of that today. I actually just recorded 2 videos for the second half of April, so this is my April voice, I guess. I got sick last week, a bit of a head cold. My wife had caught it over the weekend, and then I wound up getting it a couple days later. So thanks for that. But knocked me on my ass for a couple of days, and then I got better on Friday. It was kind of one of these things. I'm curious if anybody else has had this experience where like I was sick, and then I went to bed one night and I woke up the next morning just covered in sweat, just a puddle of sweat in my bed. It was disgusting, but I felt better. It was just like I sweat it all out or something, I guess. I don't know. But I was fine for the better part of this week. And then it's Friday right now. And yesterday it just suddenly got into my throat, and my voice has been all scratchy, and I recorded 2 videos today. Of all the times that I've been trying to get another TMI video shot and I never got it done, I'm going to do it today when my voice sounds like this. Why not? I need to be taller. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good. Oh, I'm on camera. So there's a thing I've been wanting to talk about, and that is sort of the difference between Generation X and Millennials. So I'm going to point to a video down in the description. It's from a YouTuber that I really am a fan of. His name is, his channel goes by Polyphonic, and it's in this particular video, he's talking about Bo Burnham's Inside and how it kind of was built from millennial angst. Let's just put it that way. It was a video quite a bit about millennial angst and how millennials feel cheated and like there's not really a future for them, and how they got robbed and that kind of thing. And it just got me started thinking quite a bit about Generation X and how we were brought up. I'm Generation X. I'm actually kind of on the back end of Generation X. I think Generation X is generally between like 65 and 80, being born in those years. Not that you're that old. I'm not. Yikes. But a lot of what I was seeing in that video and what made me start thinking about was how our emotions and our mental state is based on reality versus expectations. You know, if you expect something to be horrible, going to a party or something like that, if you expect it to be awful and you wind up having an average okay time, that's a big win. And you wind up going like, hey, that wasn't so bad. It's a good feeling, right? Whereas if you go to a party and you think it's gonna be a rager and all your friends are gonna be there, it's gonna be the time of your life, and you wind up getting dumped, or you know, somebody you like making out with somebody else, and it turns out, you know, if it turns out to be a bad night, or even an average night for that matter, if you went in thinking it's gonna be awesome, then your expectation was this is gonna be good. The reality was, oh, this sucks. And I think about that with how Gen Xers and Millennials were raised. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the ethos of Generation X and how we came up. And by the way, I am Generation X. That's just kind of like the group that I was a part of. I don't really like hardcore identify as Generation X. My wife does. She's like very much like, I am Gen X. She like wears it proudly and everything. And I'm just kind of like, I mean, I am, you know. To go off on a tangent just real quick, because I've been, you know, doing stuff on TikTok. It's the big new social media platform, so you know you kind of have to roll with the punches and get involved. So anyway, I've been on TikTok quite a bit, and there's a lot about TikTok that is 100% the antithesis of the Generation X ethic. Being that when we were brought up, the worst thing you could be was a poser. The worst thing you could do was be unoriginal. Everything was about being authentic. Authenticity was such a big deal for Generation X. And I feel like that ethos is, it's served well in YouTube, frankly. They always say like, it's the authenticity. It's being real with your audience. That's what makes people connect with you on YouTube. But on TikTok, it's very much sort of a sample culture, which is a nice way of saying a copy culture, a stealing culture. I mean, the thing on TikTok, it's all about trends. What's the trend? What's the trendy sound? What's the trendy filter or effect? What's the trendy, you know, dance that people are doing? And so as a Gen Xer, I'm going through and I'm just seeing people doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I see people like take a sound that somebody else had said, and then just like talking over it, lip syncing over it as if it's them saying it. And it makes me cringe so hard at the very concept that you would want to pretend you're saying something that you're not. I mean, again, it's one thing if it's like a famous movie line and you're like acting it out or something like that, or even lip syncing to a song, whatever, that's fine, that's fun. But a lot of it on TikTok, for me anyway, again, sort of as an old school Gen Xer, it just seems like somebody's just copying somebody else and trying to like ride their coattails instead of doing something original and authentic. I just say all that to kind of get across how a Gen Xer sort of sees the world, right? But getting back to sort of the millennial angst that I was talking about in that video, I think a lot about how we were brought up as Gen Xers versus millennials. The landscape of being a Gen Xer when you were growing up, and when I say grow up, I mean like from age 0 to 10, those are like the formative years. Those are the years that kind of shape what's going on up here and create these invisible scripts that kind of stick with you for the rest of your life. But we grew up in the Cold War, and all the villains in the movies were Russians, and it was always, Red Dawn. It was always about Soviets trying to take over America. It was all about the mutually assured destruction. And there was just this sort of like, sort of Damocles hanging over our head all the time that at any moment, things could go awry and the whole world could go up in flames. So getting back to that expectation versus reality thing, the expectation that we had growing up as Gen Xers in the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s, was that we weren't promised a tomorrow, like at all. We kind of grew up with this constant expectation that the world's going to go up in flames. And so when the world didn't go up in flames, we're kind of like, well, all right, cool. But it still sort of instilled in us this sort of whatever attitude. I think the slogan for Gen X is, oh, well, whatever, never mind, right? Which, by the way, I have to interject just real quick. This is going to be all over the map, sorry. But I'm seeing a lot of Gen Xers today talking about how when they were brought up, we were like the latchkey kids. Our parents weren't hanging out over us. We didn't have participation trophies. We had to walk uphill both ways in the snow, right? Like all proud about being Gen X and all that. And I got to say, if you're one of those people, stop. Because that's like the least Gen X thing in the world, to be like all proud about being Gen X. The Gen X ethos is, oh, well, whatever, never mind. So yeah, some of you Gen Xers that are like going off about how rough we had it when we were kids, you're getting a little boomery there. Careful. But the millennials came up, and by the way, I'm just going to, anytime you talk about generations, you are speaking in massive generalities. Everything that I'm saying here probably doesn't apply to everyone. Some of it doesn't even apply to me, but in general, generations can be kind of defined by the eras that they were brought up in and the environment that shaped them and the sort of shared mindset that they have in general. But millennials kind of came up in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And what happened in the early 90s? 1991, the Soviet Union fell. The Cold War ended. And I think as somebody who was maybe a child when that happened, it doesn't really resonate quite as much. But like, I remember that being the biggest thing, the biggest news of ever. Like, I mean, it was like the anti 9/11. It was this thing that just everybody couldn't stop watching them, chopping down the Berlin Wall. It was this amazing event that you knew you were watching history, but it was glorious and wonderful and not, horrifying. Your boy needs a lozenge. Good Lord. Because I mean, yeah, we were watching almost 50 years, 40, 50 years of history change on a dime, the Cold War ending. So the millennials kind of came up in that. So they came up in a prosperous time. The 90s were pretty prosperous for the most part. The Cold War was over. The imminent threat of nuclear war hanging over our heads all the time, gone. And so their expectation growing up was peace, prosperity. You get told you go to college, you work a good job, you work your way up, you buy a house, you have a family, and it all works out because that's what happened for their parents. And why wouldn't it happen for us? Because look at this age of prosperity that we're living in. Of course, you don't realize it's an age of prosperity when you're living in it. It's just what it is. So the Gen X experience was the world is going to end in fire any minute. And then, oh, okay, well, maybe things are still a little bit shit, but at least we're not on fire. Whereas the millennial experience was prosperity and happiness and no war. And then, student loan debt and Now we're back in a Cold War and recession after recession. So, I mean, a lot of people, when they try to get down on millennials, they want to fault them for having this worldview and being upset that things didn't work out the way they wanted. I am not one of those people. I think millennials have plenty of reasons to be upset, and it's very valid that they're upset. But it's just a function of you were given an expectation, and that promise that was given you was taken away. And I get it. That's enough to make a person mad. I really don't understand the anger and hatred that boomers have for millennials, outside of just that it's the oldest thing in the world. There were like writings from Greek poets in 1000 BC or something talking about how the younger generation are all slackers and they don't take anything seriously and all that. I mean, hating on a younger generation is the laziest thing that has ever happened. But especially when it's a generation that raised the generation that they're now complaining about. It's like, dude, you made them. It's like painting a painting and then hanging it up on the wall and being like, who made this shit? You did. You made that. You made this generation. You're mad that they got participation trophies? Then why did you give them participation trophies? But a lot of people talk about how Gen Xers they call this latchkey kids. The idea being that our parents weren't, really paying attention to us. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how the term latchkey came in. I'm sure somebody can let me know in the comments. But that basically, like, we were kind of the first generation where both of our parents were working. Up and through the 60s, it was not especially common for women to work. The women would stay home and the dad would go out and make the money and stuff. And economically, that was a viable thing that families could do back then. And then that changed and women's empowerment and liberation came along. Women started going to work. And our generation was kind of the first ones that didn't have a parent at home at all times. So we kind of were just left to our own devices. And yeah, for some reason that became known as latchkey kids. Again, I'm not quite sure why. And I think that sort of lack of supervision, that sort of lack of shaping influence on us, on top of this general dread of nuclear war all the time, it did just sort of instill in us this sort of just like, whatever. It's kind of nihilist, just sort of like, world's going to be what it's going to be. I'm just going to go, rock out and do my thing, right? And I like that about Gen X. I think it's a fun generation to be a part of, frankly. And we're also we're always left out of things. I love there's a graphic that was like listing all the generations, and it was like the silent generation, the boomers, the millennials, Gen Z, and it's just like, of course Gen X is left out. Of course we are. Of course we are just left out and forgotten. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot now with the recessions and of course COVID and now this whole Ukraine situation. There's this sort of wave of anxiety amongst millennials that I feel like Gen Xers we might have been a bit better equipped to deal with it. Again, just because we grew up in a Cold War. We're kind of in another one now. So it's kind of old hat to us. But anyway, I'm kind of going off the cuff here, and I feel like that's everything that I was wanting to say. Millennials, Gen X doesn't hate you. Gen X is not really capable of hate. Not for anybody specifically. Everything in general we hate, of course. I mean, everything, but nothing specific. But I think, yeah, unless I can think of something later when I'm editing this, that would be all I have to say. I just wanted to kind of put that out there. It was just some thoughts that I had about how these different generations were brought up, what our expectations were from the environment that we were brought up in, what reality has turned out to be, and how our reactions to that reality was shaped by those expectations. Again, speaking in massive generalizations, but if you guys have any thoughts, have a conversation about it down below. And maybe the next time I post one of these, my voice is going to sound more like my voice and not so much this deep, like weird Charlie Daniels voice that I got going on these days. When I woke up this morning, I sounded like the movie trailer voice guy. Desire. Action. Desire. Sometimes I actually like getting sick because my voice drops a little bit and I sound like, what's the word? A man. Anyway, that's it for now. Hope you guys are doing well. Love you, and peace. Peace out. Later, Gators.